The UK COVID inquiry, meant to investigate the government's response to the pandemic, is raising eyebrows for all the wrong reasons. Hello and welcome to GBN Originals. I'm Patrick Christys. Let's start with the elephant in the room. The Counter Disinformation Unit, or CDU, this shadowy government entity set up in 2019, expanded its reach during the pandemic to monitor social media posts by British citizens. But it wasn't just monitoring posts. The CDU was actively flagging content that they deemed to be problematic to social media companies for censorship. A government unit was working to silence British citizens. And who were these dangerous individuals they were targeting? Well, leading scientists, researchers and campaigners who dared to question the government's lockdown policies. Now, you'd expect the COVID inquiry to take a hard look at this blatant attack on free speech, but it seems the inquiry is more interested in justifying government censorship than exposing it. The secretary to the inquiry, Ben Connor, announced that they're looking into whether mis/disinformation led to vaccine hesitancy. So during the pandemic, these terms were weaponized to shut down scientific debate and enforce official narratives. We had a government unit monitoring and censoring citizens, and now we have an inquiry that appears to be siding with the censors. But it gets even more concerning. Hugo Keith, the lead counsel for the inquiry, referred to the CDU's work as tackling COVID vaccine mis and disinformation and called these real problems. He even praised the government's efforts to address these issues. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear a supposedly independent inquiry praising the very actions it's meant to be investigating, alarm bells start ringing. COVID and vaccines aside, this rings severe alarm bells about the fundamental rights of British citizens to question their government and engage in open debate, especially in times of a national emergency. It's about whether we want to live in a society where the government can label any dissenting opinion as misinformation and silence it. And let's not forget, while the CDU was busy censoring scientists and campaigners, the government, pharmaceutical companies, and certain media outlets were free to pump out industrial levels of demonstrably inaccurate, false, and in some cases, deliberately misleading information about the risks and the effects of COVID and the risks and benefits of COVID vaccines. Have you been getting a load of spam in your email recently? What about random calls? It's really annoying, isn't it? Data brokers are out there collecting your personal information. Anything from your email, your full name, your address, and even your political affiliation. Cyber criminals can even use AI to mimic the voices of friends and family to trick people into sending them money. And it gets even worse. People out there are getting huge loans taken out in their names without even knowing about it. But don't worry, because the sponsor of this video, Incogni, can help. They reach out to the data brokers on your behalf and request that your information is removed from their databases. Incogni continues to make sure that your data is removed automatically from the internet via repeated removal requests. So, how can you get started? Well, step 1, hit the link in the description, create an Incogni account and tell us whose data you'd like removed. Step 2, grant Incogni the right to work on your behalf. Step 3, sit back, relax and watch Incogni work. They will update consistently so you know when your data has been removed. Incogni is risk-free for 30 days, so you can try it for yourself and you'll get a free refund if the service isn't for you. So take back your personal data today with Incogni. Use the code GBNews using the link in the description below and you'll get 60% off an annual payment plan. It seems the rules only apply to those questioning the official narrative. You might be thinking, well, hey, look, this was just a one-off during an unprecedented crisis. But according to Dr. Alan Black and Molly Kingsley, two activists who've been following this very closely, they say the presumption already being engineered for the next pandemic appears to be to simply shut down public debate and eliminate dissenting views ever more efficiently. Essentially, they looked at what happened during the latest COVID pandemic, and they're using that to fine-tune their skills to clamp down on any dissenting voices if we were to ever have another similar situation again. Well, let's just let that think in. So they're not talking about improving the pandemic response. They're not talking about better ways to protect public health. They are talking about more efficient censorship, more effective silencing of dissent. Is this really the Britain that we want to live in? Well, according to the government, the CDU focuses on content that poses a risk to public health, public safety, or national security. Those are three words straight off the authoritarian bingo card, aren't they? There. Public health, public safety, national security. They claim they're just trying to counter disinformation threats, like suggestions that bleach can cure COVID-19. But who decides what counts as a threat? And aren't they using quite an extreme example there? One deliberately designed to make people who questioned anything sound a bit thick. Let's not forget, this is the same government that paid an external AI firm to trawl the web for so-called disinformation. And guess what? That firm's reports included legitimate posts criticising lockdown policies. Posts by leading scientists were collected by the CDU or its AI lackey. The government might claim that the CDU is all above board. They say it's not secret. It's been mentioned in Parliament that ministers are accountable. But if that's the case, then why has there been such a lack of transparency? Why did it take investigative work by organisations like Big Brother Watch to uncover the true extent of the CDU's activities? And let's talk about the impact of this investigation, shall we? Since Big Brother Watch published their findings, the number of times the government flagged speech on social media platforms has plummeted by 95%. That is a 95% reduction in backdoor censorship. I mean, if everything was above board, why was there such a dramatic change when this was brought to the public's attention? Back in 2023, the UK government was even forced to apologise after the Counter Disinformation Unit was caught lying. Yeah, you heard that right. The very unit tasked with combating misinformation was itself caught lying. The incident in question involved a tweet by journalist Julia Hartley-Brewer. The CDU falsely claimed that Hartley-Brewer had tweeted incorrect information about COVID death tolls. They even went so far as to flag this supposed misinformation to Twitter. What was the problem? Well, Hartley-Brewer's tweet was actually entirely accurate. So there we go. This wasn't just a simple mistake, no. It was a deliberate attempt to discredit and censor a very high-profile journalist with a large audience for sharing factual information that did not align to the government's narrative. The government's subsequent apology, whilst necessary, does little to address the fraudulent issues at play here. What's particularly troubling is the apparent bias of the COVID inquiry itself. Instead of critically examining the CDU's actions and the broader implications for freedom of speech, the inquiry seems to be taking a one-sided approach. Again, favours censorship. Dr. Alan Black and Molly Kingsley, who I've previously mentioned, have raised serious concerns about this bias. They point out that the inquiry's focus on misinformation, leading to vaccine hesitancy, completely ignores what should have been a legitimate scientific debate about various things that were going on during the pandemic. It also fails to address the government's own role in spreading misleading information. Moreover, the inquiry's approach seems to be based on the assumption that censorship is an effective and appropriate response to complex public health issues. It's a very dangerous precedent to set, isn't it? As Black and Kingsley argue, censorship is not a public health intervention. The inquiry's bias is further evident in its treatment of witnesses. While those who support increased online censorship are given ample time to present their views, those who raise concerns about free speech and open scientific debate are often given very short shrift. This imbalance threatens to undermine the credibility of the entire inquiry process. Perhaps most concerning of all is the potential long-term impact of this approach. If the inquiry endorses the CDU's actions and recommends even stricter censorship measures for future crises, well, it could have a very chilling effect, couldn't it, on public discourse in the UK. We must remember that free speech and open debate are not luxuries to be discarded in times of crisis. They are absolutely essential tools for navigating complex challenges and holding those in power accountable. By attempting to control the narrative and silence dissenting voices, the government risks eroding public trust and undermining its own ability to effectively respond to future events. As we reflect on the events of the past few years, I think we must ask ourselves some hard questions. Do we want to live in a society where the government can unilaterally decide what information we're allowed to see and share? Do we trust any government, regardless of political affiliation, to have that kind of power? Have they ever shown us that we can trust them? The COVID inquiry had an opportunity to address these crucial issues and chart a course towards greater transparency and accountability, really to do the right thing. Instead, it appears to be doubling down on the very practices that have caused so much concern. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Patrick Christys, and don't forget to subscribe to GB News YouTube channel for more content.